Hello and welcome to the sideboard here for the Players' Championship. I'm Ken Crocker. I'm here with at-large bid winner Rudy Briksza. Rudy, how you feeling this morning?
A little tired.
Little tired?
Just a little.
Little tired.
Yeah, Vegas was long.
Are you ready for this?
Are you?
I mean, I am. You're the one who's got to play.
Yeah, let's do this.
All right, so you got a little bit of Legacy to play first, and then some Modern. So let's talk about your Modern choice first and see what you're bringing to the table. And what it looks like you're bringing to the table is a little Grixis Twin action.
Good old Grixis Twin.
So in a format like this where there's like 16 players, obviously everyone has access to both your deck list before the match starts, and they have access to anything you would have played before this tournament starts, so they know the kind of decks you're going to play. You normally play like Grixis Twin style decks. You've played it before. You've done well with it at Opens. So why did you choose to just not switch it up for this tournament when people would know what you were on?
Well, I was actually playing recently with Patrick Sullivan's zoo deck for a while. So there's a chance that if someone went and looked up a lot of my most recent results, that's what they would find is me with Wild Nicoddles.
Okay.
And they might see my success with that and go, well, maybe that's what he'd do. But the beauty about Twin, and this is why I picked Twin for the event, in an event where people can kind of play whatever you want, Twin is the, are you ready? Gotcha.
All right, so you're looking to grab people.
Yeah, I mean, you grab people, but also it's a control deck too. You have a lot of different things going on. Snapcaster Mage is by far one of the best creatures ever printed, and one of the best creatures in Modern. It lets you do a lot of much. It gives you a lot of flexibility. And with a deck like Grixis Twin, is you get to play this control game, and if your opponent stumbles, if your opponent messes up, you just get to combo them. And there's this kind of this, formulaic, thing where you're like, remand this, Deceiver tap that, kill this guy.
Kind of tempo him out a little bit.
Right, you get to play this whole tempo game, and if your opponent ever slips up, Twin just gets him. And in a room like this, where people might be playing some weird stuff, Twin just has great answers to all of that. If somebody brings Ad Nauseam, you got him. If somebody brings Merfolk, that's fine. You're well suited against all these.
Fair enough. So looking at your creatures, obviously you got the two combo creatures in Snapcaster Mage. There's no reason to talk about Snapcaster Mage. Everyone knows what that card does. But you do have two Vendilion Clique, and I noticed that it is Grixis Twin. We still haven't gotten to the black card yet, but normally there is a black card that's sitting here, and it's normally Tassiger.
It's true.
So I don't see Tassiger or the Golden Fang in your deck, and you've chosen not to play it. And why is that?
Well, I think Grixis Twin is almost a misnomer for the deck that I'm playing. I do have black cards in it, but it's more like a very light splash. I wanted to really emulate Blue-Red Twin for the most part, but a lot of times there are a lot of cards that are very difficult to deal with, and if somebody brings a deck like Jund, somebody brings a deck that's just also trying to grind you out, having access to all these black cards gives you a leg up. If somebody brings Tarmogoyf, Roast really isn't going to get the job done sometimes. Sometimes you really need a Terminate.
Okay.
But Click here is just fantastic at all the times. It lets you see if the coast is clear. If you play against a combo player, it helps you shred their hand apart. And if someone else is playing flyers like Inkmoth Nexus, Vendilion Clique gives you a great answer to block cards like that.
Fair enough. So we see the one cryptic command, but you decided to go heavier on an other command that you have, that black splash that you're talking about, Kolaghan's command. So what exactly is Kolaghan's command doing for you that like cryptic can't? Because let's be honest, people talk about cryptic command as if it was the best, one of the best blue spells ever printed, at least in the Modern era. You're not drawing 3 cards for 1 blue mana, but you're still doing a lot of things.
Right.
So you cut back on that. Is it because you are splashing the black?
It is partially because I'm splashing the black. It's also because Cryptic Command has kind of lost its gusto. People are really playing decks that go wide. They're playing decks that are too fast for Cryptic Command. And so Cryptic Command kind of gets pushed to the wayside. You end up with this 4 converted mana cost card that costs triple blue that when you're playing against some aggressive decks, for example Burn, which I fully expect at least one person to bring tomorrow. Cryptic Command is great when you get to the late game, but you really need to get to the late game. And a card like Kolaghan's command is great at every point in turn in the game, and it's great against a bunch of different strategies. It's surprisingly good against a deck like Burn, because you can get their Swift Spear sometimes, their Eidolon, or their Goblin Guide, and making them discard gives you a lot of leverage against them, especially going into the late game. They need a density of spells, and Kolaghan's command kind of shreds them of that. And if you get to play a Snapcaster Mage and shred them some more, it might put them to the point where they might not be able to pull enough burn to kill you.
And then you don't even have to worry about comboing them.
Right.
So
Sometimes
you can just kind of beat them with that. So I noticed that you're running remands as opposed to Mana Leak. I assume that's for the tempo part of the deck?
Right. A lot of times especially, this is a deck that really likes to play a control game sometimes too, and remand helps you play into that control game a little bit more, especially towards the late game. One of the beauties about remand as opposed to Mana Leak is you get to remand your own spells, which gains you a lot of valuable tempo, especially against some of the other decks. Remand lets you rebuy on your Snapcaster Mages sometimes if they try to go to counter it. Sometimes all you need is just to prevent them from playing a card for just one more turn.
Sure. You just one more turn, you get that combo down.
Right, and the fact that it replaces itself is fantastic.
Sure. So also, you're playing the one Murder's Cut. I assume this is also helpful insofar as you were talking about earlier with the Tarmogoyf, but since you're not running the other Delve creatures like a Gurmag, Angler, or a Tasigur, that your graveyard isn't nearly as taxed as maybe a more Grixis version of this deck would be.
Right, and Murder's Cut is just a great answer to everything. It kills everything. It just kills
it does destroy target creatures.
It does. So it gives you a lot of leeway. Plus, one of the other things is and what I assume is Hunter's probably going to play something like Merfolk.
Sure.
And Master Waves is sometimes such a beating to deal with. But Murderous Cut gives you at least one good answer to that.
At least one out.
Right. So that and Cryptic are like, you're kind of like, well, I have a couple pseudo outs. And the fact that Murderous Cut will generally only cost 1 mana because you have so many fetch lands, because you have so many cheap spells, because you can kind of play this tempo game, Murderous Cut is almost always going to be just a 1 black mana destroy target creature, which is just obviously fantastic in a lot of situations. Yeah. I would definitely pay 1 black to kill something all the time.
So speaking of killing stuff just very quickly and easily, we do have a 1-of Terminate.
Yep.
So I've seen versions of this that run 2 Terminate, no Murderous Cut, 2 Terminate, 1 Murderous Cut, things of that nature. What exactly made you decide on those splits?
I wanted to be flexible, and in this case, it was a choice between playing a couple Terminates and Murderous Cut or playing the third Kolaghan's Command.
Okay.
And in a lot of situations, Kolaghan's Command is very flexible and it lets you do a lot of different crazy things. And I just almost would rather have that flexibility in a deck like Twin as opposed to just a cold answer.
Fair enough. So, and then finally, we could talk about your mana a little bit. You got the 1 Blood Crypt, but the one I'm really focusing on is here. You have Desolate Lighthouse. Now, with the ability to have to play both black, or all your black, your red, your blue, you're running Cryptic Command, you're running Kolaghan's Command, you're very color intensive. Can you really afford to run a utility land like Desolate Lighthouse as opposed to, say, something like Creeping Tar Pit?
Sure. I mean, Creeping Tar Pit is also a very good card, and it's great against stuff like Liliana. But Lighthouse kind of lets you play a true control game, because you get to play Desolate Lighthouse and pass, and kind of just get to sit and do your own thing. Your opponent's forced into action. If they don't action, you get to sculpt your hand. If you don't have anything going on, you get to sculpt your hand. It gives you all these different options. And the thing is if you want to go back and look at Cryptic Command,
sure,
that's the only real spell that we need a lot of different colors for, and we're very specific colors. It's something that we can curve well on turn 4, or it's something we can play later. But generally, for the most part, we're going to have 1 blue mana and 1 red mana and 1 black mana, and that's really going to be what our opening mana base looks like. The only thing we really need on turn 4 is double red for Splinter Twin. But for the most part, everything else, we kind of have all these different colors.
So you have all these different colors that you're speaking of. And then obviously you're running a couple basics. You're actually running more basics than most. You're running 4 island, 1 mountain, and 1 swamp. And I have to assume you're running that many basics because of this card in your sideboard.
Yeah. The thing is you can know Blood Moon's coming, and you can look at it and
I mean, to be fair, your opponents will know Blood Moon's coming.
Oh, yeah. They will look at it. They will go, that's a Blood Moon. They will fetch their basic if they have one. And even if they don't, I will just get them anyway. Blood Moon is just so good against so many different decks. It's really hard to put down a card like this. If somebody wants to bring a deck like Amulet or Scapeshift, or sometimes even in the Mirror, in a Twin Mirror, a lot of people like to fetch all of their duels as soon as they can. And sometimes you just get them.
Fair enough.
I mean, it's not something that I generally do, but Blood Moon is it's just such a good card. Like, what are you going to do?
It's too good to not play?
Right.
Okay. So speaking of good cards that we've seen in other versions of the deck, so I have to assume you're going a little bit more controlling after sideboard, as most Twin decks generally do. Is that why we have 2 copies of Pia and Kira Nalar?
Right. What I really want to do is, game 1, I want my opponent to have all this removal. I want this removal to be mostly bad, mostly dead. I want it to really not have any targets. And post-board, you can board in this Pia and Kira Nalar, and their bad removal is even worse if they decided to leave it in. And if they didn't leave too much in because you're playing a control deck, then you just have this to kind of control the amount. Plus, the one thing I like about this is if somebody does decide to play something like Affinity, having 3 creatures, 2 of which can block Etch Champion and Inkmoth Nexus, provides you a lot of leeway.
Yeah, I was going to ask, does Affinity or Infect actually influence how many PA cards you played?
Oh yeah, this is also great against Infect, just like being able to lay down the law and block everything. It's not like Legacy, where they have, Berserk to trample over you.
Just go over the top,
right,
sure.
You just block, feel free to use your pump spell to save it.
And then you could possibly use the ability on Pia Kieran as well in response, so you might take more cards for them.
Right.
You also have Painful Truths in the sideboard. So I noticed in your main deck you don't have a lot of ways to really draw cards. You have Serum Visions.
Right.
That's really it.
Yeah. Remand's more of a cycler than anything
Remand,
else.
like cycles, and it's really just a tempo play. It's not about raw card advantage. You're spending the Remand to get another card. You're not drawing cards. So Painful Truths as a one-of in the sideboard. So we've seen that the Grixis control decks, mind you, that's not what you're playing, but you're essentially trying to play a control deck, is actually in the main deck. So is there a reason why you decided to run Painful Truths only as a one-of in the sideboard?
Mostly because there are certain strategies where this card's really bad.
So Burn?
And yeah, somebody plays Burn. This is actually not too great against a deck like Affinity, which is trying to be very aggressive. There's just so many decks that are just trying to be, like even the Wild Nikado decks, that make this a bad card.
Were you expecting those kind of decks at this tournament?
I was expecting some small number of them. I wasn't sure how many to expect, but the one thing I do know is there are some people here that like to play decks like Jund.
Sure.
And this is a great option to board in against them because it just lets you refill. It was actually funny, at the Invitational, I was doing some testing with Joe Bernal, and he was playing Jund, and I told him that he should, proxy up a Painful Truth to play it. He played it, he cast it on turn 3, drew 3 extra cards, and said, I'm dumb for not playing this card.
Yeah. So, and then finally, let's talk about Thoughtseize here. So Thoughtseize, obviously we all know how good Thoughtseize is, but you're not playing any main. You're not playing really any discard main. And most people talk about Modern like it's a combo format. Like even the decks like Infinity are technically combo decks, right? You're just trying to play out on the board and get to certain cards. So Thoughtseize sees a lot of play in the fair decks. It sees play in Grixis, it sees play in Jund, Obzon, those kind of fair decks. You've decided that you want to have it in the board as opposed to the main. Is that, once again, to try to continue going more control after sideboard?
Right. Sure. Generally what you'll see in a lot of the Grixis decks is Inquisition of Kozilek.
Yeah.
That's generally the discard spell of choice in the main deck. The reason is because it costs you a lot of life to play something like Thoughtseize. But I really wanted to be prepared in the sideboard for if somebody brought Amulet, somebody decides to play Twin, and this is even okay against Jund. So it gives you a lot of options, and this card is also fine against a deck like Collected Company decks. The Wild Nikado ones excluded.
Yeah,
but
there's the Naya companies, the Obzon companies, there's a couple different ones.
Right,
but
there's a couple different ones where they you have this really good game plan where you're going to kill all their creatures and counter all their spells, but Thoughtseize kind of gives you a leg up because you get to see what you need to counter, especially post-board when people do a lot of weird things. And I'd rather have a card like Thoughtseize that can take everything, to see kind of what I want.
Sure, and it's not like you're boarding this in against Burn more than likely.
Right.
So, all right, fair enough. Well, Rudy, you have a deck that obviously you know how to play. You might catch a couple people off guard, but you know what? It's Splinter Twin. Splinter Twin just wins a lot.
Yep. It's the best deck in the format for a reason.
All right, well, good luck to you. Thank you for taking the time to size in from the sideboard, Rudy. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ken.
All right, you guys stay tuned for more action here at the Players' Championship.